Good day. Welcome to France 24's interview. Our guest today is Shaye, the People's Republic of China Ambassador to France. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for being here today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Perelman.
Thank you very much. We'll begin by talking about the coronavirus epidemic, of course. In Beijing, your capital city, the situation has been called highly worrisome. Just a few days ago, we saw the closure of some schools, airports with many fewer flights. Now the authorities apparently are saying everything's under control. We have a hard time understanding what is the exact situation. Could you explain that to us?
So according to the information that I've received, every day there are still a few dozen cases, confirmed cases, of coronavirus. But according to epidemiologists, the situation is under control. And people have faith, because as you know, China already has a lot of experience with this type of situation. And the health and prevention system has been perfected now, so we can perfectly control the situation, even though the schools are still closed. But maybe you've noticed that our exams, the high school and university exams that should take place at the beginning of July, have not been cancelled.
To some degree, wasn't this an overreaction to say it was very serious? We're talking about a few dozen cases. Wasn't that a way for China to demonstrate that it's able to react? Because we know it was criticized for their initial reaction on the appearance of the virus.
Now, I think that this is a difference between the approaches of China and European countries. This means that the Chinese government and the governments at all different levels in China are taking this very seriously. They're taking the epidemic very seriously. So our approach has been to attack, first of all, the virus in order to, how should I say, stem the virus's spread. And we've done that since the beginning.
European governments, therefore, weren't serious enough, in your opinion?
That's not what I wanted to say. What I mean is that the Chinese government attaches a lot of importance and seriousness to the fight against this virus.
Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to talk about international affairs now, particularly something that your Minister for Foreign Affairs said. He called this a new Cold War between China and the United States. There have been confrontations over and over again, for the time being verbal confrontations. The U.S. President Donald Trump claimed his administration would not hesitate to cut U.S. economic ties from China. That's a very direct threat.
The Cold War is not what China wants. I think the foreign minister, he wants to say is that we don't want a Cold War. Our policy, our foreign policy, has always been constant. It's a policy of peace and independence. And when it comes to the U.S., the Chinese government has adopted a position that is based on making sure that cooperation, coordination, and stability should govern our bilateral relations, even if the Trump administration has been pushing for cutting ties. This is not what we want. And we believe that it isn't even possible to cut ties with China. And I think that if Americans should apply this policy, that this would really be shooting themselves in the foot.
But still, we see from the Trump administration there have been trade sanctions, other types of sanctions as well. We see there have been accusations regarding the coronavirus and other subjects as well. They're more and more substantial, and China is responding in a more and more vehement fashion. Are you not afraid, nonetheless, that at some point, at some time, things might get off track? The verbal conflict could lead to something much more serious. Is it not an area of risk? Are we at danger here?
Yes, this danger does exist. But it is basically a lot of media hype from the part of the American government. They have been publicizing rumors and lies about China. But China has to stand up in order to defend itself, to defend our own dignity, our reputation, and our interests, the interests of our state. But I think that in doing this, China is always open to cooperation with the United States and to have normal relations with them and to maintain a stable bilateral relationship.
On to another subject, tension between China and another country, Canada. This Friday, we learned 2 Canadians who had been held in China for 18 months were now indicted for espionage by Beijing. Now, to Canada's mind, this is clearly a response to the extradition of the ex-CFO at Huawei, who's being called for in the United States. She's currently in Canada. The question is China doing this to try to exert pressure on Canada?
So speaking about Canada, I have a lot to say about this.
You were ambassador there in the past, I must mention.
Yes, of course. I have strong feelings and very friendly feelings towards Canada. I like Canada and I like the Canadian people. And all the people that I have met in Canada, I've had very honest and friendly relationships with them. We've always been friends. Even my colleagues at the foreign ministry that I've worked with, we've had very close and regular exchanges, very friendly exchanges. Even if after the Meng Wanzhou affair, there were exchanges, of course, that were often about this topic. But we know that we are serving our own countries, we are serving our respective governments. But after these exchanges, we remain friends, and the Chinese people have very warm and deep feelings towards Canada because of 2 people. One of them was the Dr. Bethune, and the other was the former Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, the father. And they did a lot for the development of friendly relationships between our 2 people. When it comes to the Meng Wanzhou case, I think that this is a serious mistake on Canada's behalf. And I'm very sad to see how our bilateral relations are going because of this case.
Do you think this is revenge by China?
As to the 2 Canadians in China, that's something else completely. China has always applied the rule of law, and we respect our legal system, our independent legal system. And so it isn't a form of revenge. We are always applying our laws.
All right. Another area of tension, there are several. Australia, this past Friday, accused a sophisticated state player to have conducted a cyber attack against companies and government entities. Many feel that the Prime Minister in Australia is alluding to China.
So all countries have to respect each other in their bilateral relationships. When a country accuses another, they have to have proof, they have to have arguments. They can't just make empty accusations.
So you're denying being behind these attacks that Australia is denouncing?
Of course, China never attacks other countries using cyber espionage.
Les puissances du G7.
The G7 countries issued a press release this week condemning the implementation in Hong Kong of the national security law. It's highly controversial. All G7 countries have agreed to speak out against this.
This is a blatant interference in China's internal affairs. The Hong Kong security law is under the remit of the central government. It has nothing to do with other countries. And all countries around the world take care of their own national security. Hong Kong is a territory that belongs to China, and so its national security has to...
This is the end of the system called One Country, Two Systems.
It's quite the opposite. This is actually a perfectioning of this principle, of this one country, two system policy. Because if we do not have this law, there will not be any punishment under this law. And so many Europeans are worried that this law will affect investment, foreign investment. But according to what I think, it's quite the opposite. You may have noticed that a few days ago, two large internet companies, large Chinese companies, NetEase and JD.com, had IPOs at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and they raised a large amount of capital. This means that the Hong Kong security law in Hong Kong actually promotes better business environment in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Unfortunately, we have no further time to talk about many different subjects. Thank you very much for being our guest. Thank you for watching this interview on France 24.